Yes, hello, storytellers, and hello, world, and welcome again to another featured author interview. We are now streaming live in our Readers Magnet Facebook page. So if you haven't, subscribed yet or check our page, kindly do so. This is also available in our YouTube channel, so you might want to check that out and click that subscribe button so that you will be notified with what's happening here with Reader's Magnet. And of course, joining us today to tell us more about his book, Mr. Geoffrey Bott. He's a he's a scientist. He's a father, an entrepreneur, and also a writer. And he'll be talking about the art of deception. But he also published different, sequel of this book. I believe this is a sequel of, deception book, and it's very interesting. But probably to tell us more about that, let's go ahead and welcome Mr. Geoffrey Butt. How are you doing today, Geoffrey?
Good afternoon, Red. I'm doing very well, thank you. I'm excited to this interview, and if I talk too much, you'll have to stop me because I'm an introvert.
No, it's okay. You're fine. Well, the main purpose of this interview is to introduce yourself to the audience and also promote your book. So there's nothing wrong in doing such a thing like that, right? But before we proceed with your books, right? I've read your background, and I don't know where to start actually. So I'll let you do the talking for that one. So can you tell us more about Mr. Geoffrey Butt?
Yes, I'm English. You can tell by my accent here. I was born in England, raised over there, moved different cities. My father moved around, so I'm used to moving and living in different cities, different homes. And then when in 84, I graduated with an electronic engineering degree, and then worked for a company where I traveled the world. After a while, I wanted to move to America because I had family that moved over here. So I moved in 1986, worked for the company that I worked for in England, but it was their subsidiary in America. And I
Mm.
started out, I was fresh. I was a young engineer, and I somehow got into a work environment that I really enjoyed. And I work in science, I work in mass spectrometry. I fix scientific instruments, but I progressed from that. I got invited to work for UC Berkeley by Professor
Wow.
Julie Leary. She took me on when I got fired in the US from my job. She took me on, and I changed. I learned from being an engineer to being a scientist, and I progressed from that. I started my own business at 24. I've traveled the world. I've been invited to labs around the world, and it's really exciting. I've been involved in two world's first scientific studies, and I've even had a paper published with me as the author. And it's exciting. I've done a lot of work, and I'm really proud of what I've done. But I got thrown into that too. But I progressed, and I took on the challenge, and writing progressed from that. But in to write my first book, I had to go through serious traumatic events, and I didn't even
Oh,
think, I didn't even think I would be a writer. I just, in order to get through what I went through, I wrote a manuscript. This manuscript was 110,000 words. I mean, it was massive. I printed it
yep.
out. It was 500 pages, and then I sent it off to professionals, and they thought it was worthy of publishing, and that's where Uphill came from. But it's a progression I never really thought would happen when I was in high school, when I was in junior high, when I was in university. It just
Right.
occurred to me I would publish books.
Right. So talking about being an engineer, how is that for you? Like, is it really difficult to be an engineer? Because they said that, it's tough to be an engineer. You have to deal a lot of stress.
Yeah, I was fortunate again. I did electronic engineering. I graduated before I was 21 with an engineering degree. And I'm lucky. I'm not going to boast about my abilities, but I worked where I traveled, and I repaired electronic boards to component level. that's rare now. You can't do that. In fact, I would, customers would ask me to do something, and I would design the circuit boards. I would go to
Mm.
stores and I would buy the components to make these circuit boards, and I would do it in situ in the labs. I would make these boards, install it into the mass specs, and get them to work. I mean, it was phenomenal work when I look back. But I'm lucky that today that doesn't work. The electronics is sometimes too elaborate. The corporations don't care. They just want to swap out the boards. They don't want engineers on site fixing them. And that era has disappeared. It's not like that anymore. So I'm very fortunate. I still do that. I still travel on site, and I still repair electronic circuit boards, and I still go overseas. It's a couple of weeks ago I was in Canada. It's exciting,
Wow.
and next month I'm in Canada too. It's to me it's exciting. Yeah, it was a challenge, but I was kind of naive as a teenager when I was growing up, and when I got the degree, I didn't really understand where I was heading or how good I was. It was just I was an introvert as a kid, and we grew up in England. Children were to be seen and not heard, and that's how it was, And when I go on site, I represent the company I'm working for. Now I represent myself; it's my own company, but I'm out there on my own. So you can't be an introvert. You can't be second guessing yourself, because people
Exactly.
people invite you onto the site into their labs because you're the expert, right? So
That's
I
true.
I walk in as the expert, and so you got to behave like you know what you're doing. And sometimes you don't, but you've got to improvise, and you've got to work around what you don't know. You can't do everything; it's impossible. But
That's right.
you've got to portray that confidence to the people who are paying you.
Exactly. Well, talking about being a writer, here, Jeffrey, what is your, or can you describe the inspiration behind your books?
Oh my goodness! As I said, I went through some terrible events. I had
Okay.
to keep it very short. I've had 13 left knee surgeries, and nobody's had left. Nobody's had that many surgeries on one knee. The last seven
Wow.
were the last seven were terrible. I had rejections, complications. I had my knee rebuilt. I was too young to have it replaced, and so I rejected that procedure the first time. I had it done a second time. I rejected that too. A month after I rejected my knee rebuild surgeries, my wife filed for divorce. I wasn't prepared for that. I was too busy going through surgeries. I was knocked out. I was beaten up with the surgical procedures, with the medications, with anesthesia, addictions to opioids. I
Mhm.
mean, I was a mess. So she filed for divorce, and then we sold a house. I bought another house. 4 months later, my neighborhood was destroyed in a forest fire.
Wow.
It was just
That's a
one thing,
lot.
yeah, one thing after another. And then, like an idiot, I fell in love again, and she moved into my house, and 8 months later, she lied to sheriffs and threw me in jail. So there's all this chaos going on in my personal life, but I could still travel, and I even on crutches. I was traveling on crutches to other countries too, and I was doing my work, and I could compartmentalize. It's a word I use in Uphill. I could put all my chaos into the back of my head, some parts of my brain that can't be accessed. Probably the same area where common sense is. I can't access it. So I was doing all this amazing stuff on site, and I did. I'm boasting a little bit, but I did phenomenal work on site while all this chaos was going on in my background, in my personal life. And a friend I worked with, a guy I worked with who became a friend, an English guy in Venezuela. I got invited to the national oil company down there to work in their lab. He read my book. He said, Jeff, he said, you were down here twice. I never knew your life was in chaos while you were working in his lab.
Wow.
I hid that. I hid all that stuff. So I wrote this book, and I sent it off to professional people. The editor,
Mm.
she's a renowned editor, Claire Fortier, and she said, I got to send this off to a published writer, a professional writer. So he read it and said, Jeff, you've got to publish this work, because what you've gone through, will other people can relate to that. And so he said, but you've got to make these changes because I had no idea how to write. And so I sat
Right,
down,
right.
I made these changes, and it turned into a book, and it was published in 2019. 2020 was nominated for an Independent Writers Award, which to me is phenomenal. As I say, I didn't know I could write.
Exactly.
And then
That's true.
people, yeah, sorry, Red. People who read it said you'd write a good thriller because of your writing style. I bring in experiences overseas, and I write in countries I've been to, mostly anyway. I write about a lot of places I've been to, so I can visually see what I'm writing, and I bring that into the book, which brings them alive. And so in 2020, my business was shut down because of COVID-19 mandates. You know, you
Oh,
couldn't travel, you couldn't do any of that stuff. I'd lost a lot of business, and so I sat down and wrote Biological Deception, and that was my first book. And the craziness going on in the world gave me other ideas and other thoughts, and so instead of one book, it turned into a trilogy. And the second book is the one we're talking about now, is Art of Deception.
art of deception.
And
Right.
I wrote this, sorry, Red, I wrote this 2 years ago, and I bring in artificial intelligence. Well, that wasn't the forefront of what we see today. So 2 years ago, I wrote this book, and now someone called it predictive fiction. And another guy called it priction. He shortened predictive fiction because there's some of the stories in my books actually are coming true. And it's supposed to be fiction, but I write it in a way that makes it realistic. And I think people that like that writing style.
Right. Well, talking about predictive writing, what are what is this story in your book that you're telling me right now that is somehow happening already?
Um, we're talking about art of deception, right? Well,
Mhm.
I bring in artificial intelligence, and after biological deception, where the perpetrators in the world wanted to take over the world by developing a virus around the world, and they were going to inject that into people. Well, my main character, Daniel Cross, he takes that on, and he takes on these people. He kills the virus. He kills that whole story. It was a U.S. senator that was funding all that, and that could be reality. There's a lot of weird stuff going on in governments these days, and that could be a reality. After COVID-19, we had supply chain issues. So I thought, well, okay, let's see what we can do with this. And I had robots who were controlling ships, and they were sinking these ships. The first chapter, I always try and write the first chapters that'll entice the reader. So there's always action. So my first chapters are quite prolific. They're very strong. And I learned that from Jaws. When Jaws came out in 1974, I read the book first, and the first chapter was regarded as one of the best first chapters in a novel because it was stunning. You could not read the first chapter, not read the rest of the book. It was remarkable. So that's how I write. And my first chapter in Art of Deception is ships are sinking and disappearing, and one of the ships is blown up in the Panama Canal. I mean, it literally
Wow.
explodes. And so and as it turns out, the robots are taking over these ships. They're controlling them, but robots have to be controlled. They're not individual. They have to be controlled by some mechanism. But
Exactly.
yeah, so I can't give the story away, but they
Right, right.
I want people to read the book, but they kidnap a British scientist who has a patent on skin technology, and so
Oh, okay.
the robots are real. They're real clones. They look real, except you can't clone. I don't believe you can clone a robot fully. There has to be something that's missing, and Daniel Cross sees that. He comes across that because one of his friends was cloned from high school, and he's looking at his friend, and he realizes something's not right, something is missing, and so to me, you can't 100% clone a person. There's going to be something missing. I might have an accent that's different, or I might have some skin imperfections, or a birthmark or something that's going to be missed by people who are doing the cloning.
Exactly.
And
Right.
robots are programmed, so it's humans that are programming the robots, and there's going to be human errors from that programming. It doesn't matter how expert they are, right?
Exactly.
There's going to
That's
be some
true.
issues. Yeah. So I
I
brought,
agree.
and one of the chapters, well, later on in the book, actually, one of the world leaders, and I'm not going to say who, was replaced with a clone. Nobody knew that except Daniel Cross, because something, my main character, because something wasn't right with the clone. And the story is he has to, in order to stop the robots and artificial intelligence, he has to locate where the source of their control is. And that's the
Right.
story. He travels the world and looks for this, where they're being controlled, and that's how he terminates that.
Wow, that's really full of action and very interesting,
Yes, it is.
story right there, uh, Jeffrey. But talking about clone AIs, it's getting advanced. Every year, it's getting better for some other people out there. They were telling us that, hey, AI is now going to help us in making our job, our task easier. What do you think about this kind of technology and this cloning that is happening even in Japan? I saw this video that they were doing some presentation about an AI or a robot that is actually talking just like a human being. Really looks like a human being. I think it's a woman. I don't know, like I just couldn't remember. But what do you think? What do you think is the advantage of those kind of stuff and the disadvantage?
Um, I'm going to be a little sarcastic and funny here, but if I've heard that they're building robots as replacement in relationships, and so I mean that is scary. That's scary stuff. But this is going on now. I'm not making this stuff up. I mean, people are ordering lady friends that men can be in relationships with. Um, the funny side of that is I don't think this AI robot can take your house, your bank accounts, and your business and your cars. That's just a personal thing.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But talking about your going back to your book, what do you think are the key ingredients in creating a compelling story?
I think the ingredients are, for me, right? People like my writing style because it's simple. It's simple English. That's number one. You don't need a dictionary. No one's going to pick up a dictionary to understand my stories, even though they're
Okay.
complex. I have had complexity. There's other things going on within the story. It's interesting, and so I've tried to keep the interest in the stories. The other thing
Make
is
it
to
simple.
keep it simple,
Yeah.
complex, but readable. And you've got to keep the excitement. My neighbor read my books, and I was shocked and surprised because he said, "Jeff," he said, "I couldn't put them down." He said, My wife would be yelling at me to come and go somewhere." And he said, "No, I got to finish this chapter. I want to know what happens," and that's a
Right.
compliment.
Right.
The other thing is when you watch, I don't watch Marvel movies because to me they're false, and the superheroes are always perfect. They don't make mistakes. They've got no emotions. They've got no soul, right? Whereas my main character, Daniel Cross, people think he's based on me, but he's not. Except his personality, his soul has been created by events that have happened in his life, and so I make him emotional. I make him have a character. I make even he's crying in the stories. And I admit biological deception, the first one, there's parts of that where I'm in tears because I've created this emotional character and it gets to me too. And I think people relate to that. People like that. He seems real because people are shaped by events that have happened in their lives, and this is true. I am too.
Wow.
Things have happened to me that have shaped me. I could be a nasty, ugly person. Well, I might still be ugly, but I mean, I could be a nasty person based on what's happened. But you can't. I can't. And all those surgeries that I went through, they changed my chemistry, And I get emotional too. My father had a stroke when he was 50, 58, I think, and I was 20. I was in university when he had a massive stroke. And later in life, I would fly from US back to England, and I would see him. He would be watching a movie, and I could see he was trying to stop crying. I could see he didn't want other people to see him crying. And that's not him. That's the events that happened. That's the stroke that he had. It's a psychological. It's not just a physical disability. It's psychological too. There's a lot of destruction that
It
goes
really
on.
affects.
Yeah, it's affects. People don't understand that, but I've been through it. I wish I'd had my knee surgeries when he was still alive, because I might have understood him more. I might have been able to open up to him. But I'm unfortunately like that. I mean, I do have tears. I can watch a sad movie or a happy movie, and I'm emotionally moved because that's who I am now. Things changed, you know. I went through
Exactly.
I went through what I went through when you're in a forest fire and you see your neighborhood destroyed, and that's how I got to know some of my neighbors, because they're stood crying next to their homes that have disappeared. You know, they're just a pile of rubble, and you you can relate to these people because wow, it's hard to explain, but
Exactly. Well,
I'm emotional.
there's like
Sorry, Red. And so
no, it's okay.
my
It's
character
okay.
in the books he's emotionally as I think it's important. He has a personality, has a character, he has soul, and he does get emotional at times. And because of events that have happened in his life, I created a guy who's had events happen in his life that changed who he is, and that's
Wow.
how most people are, I think.
Wow. And anyway, Jeff, if your readers could only remember one thing about your books, right? Or about this book, Art of Deception, what do you want them to, or what do you want it to be?
One thing that's hard. You can see I like to talk. One thing is they're real. You know, I make them real. I bring them alive, and places that they go to, things that they see, things that they happen. These are
Mhm.
real. I mean, even though it's fiction, I still bring them alive, and people can put them down and go, "Wow, holy
So it's
smoke!"
like it's like creating an event or a scene that is sort of like bringing you into reality,
Correct, Red.
or make you
Yeah, sorry, Red. And I went through a divorce. I went through a forest fire in '07 that destroyed my neighborhood. Well, we got evacuated 2 years ago, 2021, in August. The same town, we got evacuated, and we were given 10 minutes to get out. We'd watched this smoke fill the Tahoe Valley for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and then all of a sudden, Sunday morning, we get a message, an emergency message. You've got 10 minutes to get out, and we had no
wow,
we had no choice. And the cops came, the sirens were going, the cops were wearing flak jackets and freaking had rifles and stuff. They were serious. They got us out. And as we were evacuating, PTSD hit. And I'm in tears. I'm driving out of town. My son is behind me because he lives with me, and he was the same thing. He had PTSD because we're going through the same thing. And so I was writing Art of Deception when I was being evacuated, and I went to Reno. I was in an apartment in Reno for 2 weeks, and one of the chapters I decide, okay, I'm Daniel Cross and his fiance, his girlfriend, they're going to be evacuated because someone tries to kill him by setting fire to the forest behind his house. So I can bring those feelings, the sound, the energy, because I've seen it. I've been here when a
you
forest fire hit.
experience it.
Yeah, I've experienced
Exactly.
it. I heard that noise. It's like a freight train coming. Yeah, I've seen it. It's scary,
Right.
man.
I
Yeah.
know. Well, being in that kind of situation, I don't think I'll be able to manage that because I think I'm just kind of lucky that I never experienced that kind of situation, Jeff. But one last question for you before we go. What would you or who would you recommend your books?
Um, I'm not going to boast again. I don't like to boast. People have called them Tom Clancy style, and
Okay.
or late Tom Clancy. So
Wow.
people who like that kind of genre, people who like thrillers, who like excitement, who I mean we've all watched the movies on TV, right? It's
Yep.
people who want that excitement. The thing is though, people don't believe some of this stuff is going on, and like I said, I like to bring it is fiction, but I like to bring reality into some of these fictional stories. And unfortunately, a lot of this stuff is going on in the background. It is actually happening. Governments are not necessarily doing things to in your favor, So
Right.
who
Well,
read people who want thrillers, people who like some excitement in their lives, people I don't know who reads, those kind of movies, but that's what that I think they would enjoy the reads because there's energy. You ask me what will they feel? That well, they'll feel energy too. It's hard to describe in one word what they would feel, but there's a lot of energy in my stories because I'm
this
energized.
is okay. So this is like an action-packed kind of thing with some
Correct.
AI and some wow, that's interesting. Well, it kind of reminds me of a book from Mr. I'm trying to remember the name. Dean Koontz. I don't know if you know this guy. He wrote Eye of Darkness, Eye of
I
the
do.
Darkness, something like
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
There's a very interesting, book as well because that book was written like maybe 1970 or something, 80s, and he was able to predict, COVID-19 or COVID or that virus way back, 2020, which is really, sort of like what you are trying to do right now with your book, as what I've noticed, you know. So yeah, that's really amazing, Jeff. And hopefully, for those who are watching us live right now, if you are interested with his book, you can check him out on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and you also have your own website, Jeff, right?
I've got a book here just so you
Oh
can
yeah,
see.
like
Yeah.
wow, we almost forgot about that. I mean, I was just
And a picture of me after I took a shower. I look pretty good actually.
oh yeah, yeah.
But
So this book, like the one that you have right now, does it have like pictures inside, Jeff,
it
or just
doesn't. No,
just
uphill
plain
has
text?
pictures. Uphill has a lot of pictures. In fact,
Oh, okay.
that was my first book, and I made
Mm,
mistakes. It was expensive. It has colored photos in it, but no, the other three books that are out: Biological Deception, Art of Deception, and my latest one, Political Deception. The trilogy there's no pictures in the book. Just some guy on the back who wrote the thing.
well, probably before we end this, interview, Jeff, kindly invite your audience, or our audience rather, or your anybody that might be interested in checking you out. Do you have any shows, um, any plans or any events that you will be participating rather for your book, your website, stuff like that, or if you have a social media accounts?
I'm just getting involved in social media. I have the website, which is solihullpublishing.com. Solihull is where I was born, actually, in England.
Oh,
And
okay.
I was invited, which is how we met, Readers Magnet, and how we are here. I was invited to have a book at the London International book fair,
Wow.
next week, actually. And then, of course, I'm at the LA Times Festival of Books in April, and I will be attending that too. I will be there.
You will
Uh,
be the wow. Okay,
I
so
will
they
be
can
there.
they can get a copy, a signed copy from you if they
We're,
wish to.
we're discussing that right now with people at Readers Magnet. Yeah, but
Okay,
they can go
okay,
on
okay.
my website if they order a book on my website. I'll be happy to sign one and send it back to you.
Wow. Well, there you go, guys. Like what you told me earlier, Jeff, in the backstage. 10 minutes, 20 minutes, or even an hour could not be, enough for us to talk about your books. You have lots of books already, uphill, this deception series, and it's really interesting. And if you guys wanted to know more about Jeff, just, check him out. Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com. His website is, it's actually in the screen right now, solely Publishing.com, and he will be in LA Times Festival of Books. So if you want a signed copy, go ahead and check him out in the upcoming LA Times Festival of Books, and also in London next week. So yeah, thank you very much, Jeff, for your time today. I really enjoyed doing this interview to you. I mean, I wanted to ask you more, but we're kind of like running out of time here. Yeah, thank you very much again for
You,
your time.
you did say it was going to be half an hour, and I said that's about 3 days too short. Yeah, it's just, life changes people, unfortunately, and you can have bad events that you can't escape from, and you become a bad person. But I never wanted that to happen, and you can't, because then it affects you. You can't deal with life, this thing, and then you take it out on other people. And I had a fiance that threw me in jail, and she had a rough life.
Wow.
She had a rough life as a teenager, and couldn't deal with it, and lied to sheriffs and had me pay for it. And you can't do that. That's not fair on those people.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much again, Jeff, for your time. I'm very proud of you. I look forward for you in this upcoming LA Times Festival of Book. And as we say it here with Readers Magnet, we share your story with the world. Have a great day.
Thank you, Red. I've enjoyed it. Thank you.